If anyone had asked a few years back, the answer would have been simple. Lucky man. A steady job, a roof that didn't leak, and most of all, a wife who smiled like the world got brighter when the door opened, and it was me. I worked 2 jobs, not because the bills were chasing me, but because I wanted to stack a future we could stand on without wobbling. It was tiring, sure, but fatigue feels different when the reason is love. Our home was modest and comfortable. No marble, no grand staircase, just enough. And inside that enough, I thought I had everything. A partner who waited up after long shifts, messages pinging my phone in the middle of the day. Miss you, take care, love you. I believed every word. When love is honest, suspicion feels like an insult. So I didn't question, I trusted. But love has a way of blinding the parts of the picture that need light most. What I called perfect had a crack running through it so clean, I didn't feel the split until the whole thing shifted. One evening, body aching from the day, sun dropping amber across the street. I was already rehearsing the sequence shower, food, a few hours of sleep before the next shift, when my neighbor called out. We weren't close. Nods in the driveway, a brief, "How's it going?" Nothing more. An older man, late 50s, the type who keeps a quiet index of the street from a front porch chair. He motioned me over with a look that said, this wasn't small talk. "I don't want to cause trouble," he started, eyes flicking left and right. "And maybe it's none of my business, but your wife's been bringing a man home when you're at work." I blinked and laughed the way people laugh when their brain needs a second to refuse a fact. "A man?" I said, shaking my head. If someone was here, it was probably family, a cousin, something like that. He didn't even raise a smile. "I don't think so," he said quietly. "Same guy, a few times, always when you're not around." The air went heavier. For a moment, his words almost landed. Almost. Then I brushed it off because the alternative hurt too much to try on. Messages, kisses before sunrise. "I love you," whispered into the fabric of routine. How does that square with a stranger's car in my driveway? "I appreciate it," I said, waving him off, "but you must be mistaken." He looked like he wanted to add something else, then just nodded slowly. "All right, maybe I am." That night, with the lights off and the house breathing its familiar sounds, his warning ran in a loop I couldn't mute. There had to be an explanation, family, a friend, something harmless. I told myself that until the lie fell flat in my mouth. I didn't want to prove her guilty. I needed to prove her innocent. While she ran errands the next day, I set up small cameras, simple ones with memory cards, nothing expensive, just a handful in places she'd never notice. If nothing was happening, I'd delete and forget. If something was, I wanted proof truth wouldn't argue with. My hands shook as I tucked the last one into place. I hated the feeling of suspicion in my own home. But not knowing was worse. Days went by before I sat down with the laptop to check the files. The first clips were a relief. Her moving through the day, TV murmuring in the background, dinner being made, nothing that didn't belong. I exhaled and told myself to drag the folder to the trash. I clicked one more file. There she was in the living room, smiling, pouring 2 glasses of wine. He walked in, a man I'd never seen. Not a relative, not a neighbor, a stranger who didn't look lost on his way to the wrong address. They were comfortable with each other in the way that comes from repetition, not accident. They sat too close. He leaned in and kissed her. His arm slipped around her waist like he'd done it before. My chest pulled tight. They stood, fingers laced, and headed upstairs to our bedroom. I kept watching an empty hallway and a closed door, knowing exactly what I wasn't seeing. After a while, he came back out wearing my bathrobe, the one that still held the scent of my mornings. I paused the video and closed my eyes to remember how to breathe. I could have confronted her. I could have asked why. But I knew the script tears, apologies, a stumble through lines that make betrayal sound like an accident. Maybe even a turn that put the blame in my lap. Too many shifts, not enough attention. You made me feel alone. I refused to audition for a role in that performance, so I chose silence over spectacle. I started planning. Leaving wasn't going to be a slammed door and a suitcase on the porch. It would be a clean erasure, no loose ends, no trail. I tightened our budget under the banner of saving and stashed every spare dollar from both jobs. I'd always handled the finances. Small shifts didn't read as suspicious. I opened a private account with a global payment solution and began moving only my share. Slow, small transfers, a few hundred at a time. Nothing that would trigger alarms. Credit cards came next. We shared a few. I'm consolidating, switching banks, I said. Better terms. She nodded without really listening. As long as her transactions cleared, the rest was noise. One by one, I shut down the connections that could track me, made sure nothing in the statements would sketch the outline of where I'd go. Then I resigned, quietly, on good terms, handshakes and keep in touch. No fireworks to make me memorable. Colleagues wished me well. No one knew that once I walked out of those doors, my past would lose my forwarding address. All the while, she kept the schedule I'd caught on camera, still bringing him into the house, still using the bed we'd promised each other in. The night before I left, I sat in the living room and let the place show me its inventory one last time. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a museum of how a man can be made a fool without raising a voice. I took off my wedding ring, the simple gold band that had carried vows across years, rolled it between my fingers until the weight felt like nothing, then set it down and left it behind. At 4:30 a.m., with a bag on my shoulder and no more questions I wanted answered, I turned the handle and stepped out. The door clicked shut. I didn't look back. By the time the sun lifted its first line over the street, I was already gone. I didn't see the aftermath, but I heard it later. She woke up to an empty bed and assumed nothing. Then the quiet got louder. She walked the house calling my name and got no reply. My boots and jacket weren't where they always were. The hook by the door was missing the keys I always left there. Calls to my phone went straight to voicemail. She tried work and heard I'd resigned last week. Something shifted in her chest then. That was the moment she learned the difference between leaving and disappearing. At the bank, she learned the rest. The joint account was almost bare. My share moved, hers untouched. I hadn't run off with money that wasn't mine. I'd just made sure there was no cord to pull that would lead her to me. She hired a private investigator and spent money she didn't have looking for someone who no longer wanted to be found. Every avenue ended in a clean edge. Every attempt confirmed the same thing. This wasn't a tantrum, it was a plan. Regret, I'm told, did what regret does, ate daily, until there wasn't much left, but the knowledge that the apology she wanted to give would never find an ear. While she searched, I was already living a life that didn't need hiding. Far from the country and the old street, I found an island in the Caribbean where time breathed differently. Alone at first, and then not. Quiet, then laughter. A woman who didn't ask to be rescued, who treated respect like air instead of currency. Love felt like what it should, simple, honest, not a puzzle you have to solve to be allowed in. We married. Our daughter arrived and redrew the map of what matters. In her small hand, the past shrank until there wasn't room for it in the day. Years went by without her name crossing my mind in any way that hurt. Then she found me. I didn't see her first. She saw me, standing outside the market, my daughter tugging at my fingers, pointing at something sweet with a smile I would cross oceans to protect. She must have stood there and let the picture hit her. Not broken, not bitter, not haunted, just whole. She stepped closer, lips parting around my name like a plea, a last attempt to tie a string between who we were and who I am. I tilted my head, studied her the way you study a stranger who looks familiar and doesn't. She searched my face for the old warmth, for any small kindness to stand on. There wasn't any. "I'm sorry," I said evenly. "Do I know you?" The words landed harder than any anger I could have thrown. Something in her eyes gave way. Not drama, not rage, just defeat. I didn't wait. I didn't offer closure that would let her write a softer ending for herself. I turned, squeezed my daughter's hand, and walked away. No backward glance, no second thought. Peace is light when it's real. It weighs nothing on your shoulders. There was a time I thought I'd carry that betrayal like a stone forever. Felt sure the echo would be louder than anything I could build after. It wasn't. One choice erased years of promises. One morning erased me from the story that had become a lie. Some betrayals aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to be forgotten. If this had been your door and your life, what would you have done? Confronted? Left quietly? Handled it another way? Drop a line? Share a version? Pass this to someone who's standing at the same crossroads and needs to see what the other road can look like.